The ship trembled as it pierced the atmosphere of Lisseri Prime. Below, the city shimmered like a sea of silver and sapphire, towers floating above oceans of light, casting reflections across the calm waters. Mason's hands gripped the controls as alarms from approaching patrols blared. He had expected this. The Lissari were cautious, proud, and ruthless when it came to protecting their royal family. One wrong move and they could destroy him without a second thought. Lyra's violet eyes widened as she looked out at her home. Memories of her childhood came rushing back. The gleaming palace where she had danced under alien suns, the gardens that had smelled of crystal blooms, and her mother, the queen, whose presence had once been the center of her universe. Her heart ached. After years of isolation, of drifting in the cold emptiness of space, the warmth of home seemed almost too much to bear. Mason's voice was calm but firm. "Stay quiet and follow my lead. If they see you first, it could go badly." Lyra nodded, gripping his arm. Her hand was warm, grounding him in the middle of the tension. Despite her fear, there was determination in her posture, a courage he had never expected to find in someone so fragile-looking. But she was far from fragile. Mason had seen her strength in the face of pirates, her ability to control forces she barely understood, and her quick thinking during crises. She was extraordinary. The patrol ships moved in formation around them, their energy shields flickering with the tension of identification protocols. Mason activated the ship's communications panel, trying to find a way to announce their arrival without triggering alarms. The voice that answered was cold, mechanical, and sharp. "Unauthorized vessel. Identify yourself immediately." Mason hesitated, then spoke clearly. "I am Mason, a human engineer. I carry Princess Lyra Saraline of the Lyseri Empire. She has been lost for years. I bring her home safely." There was a pause, then the mechanical voice repeated, "Unauthorized vessel. State your authorization code." Lyra's hands trembled as she realized the importance of what Mason was saying. This was her home, her empire, and every moment now carried the weight of centuries of politics, pride, and power. She remembered her mother's voice, stern and commanding. She remembered the betrayal that had led to her disappearance. She closed her eyes and spoke softly but with authority she had never used in years. "I am Princess Lyra Saraline, daughter of Queen Saraline. I return home." The patrol's response was immediate and tense. Energy beams surrounded the ship, but a moment later they lowered, opening a corridor for the vessel to land. Mason exhaled. They were being escorted, not destroyed. That was a good sign. The landing was smooth, and soldiers in polished silver armor quickly surrounded them. Mason raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Lyra stepped forward, standing tall despite her nerves. Every step she took resonated with authority. The soldiers regarded her with a mix of awe and uncertainty, whispering to each other in their melodic tongue. They were brought before the palace gates, a vast structure of silver spires and floating terraces. Guards saluted, though their eyes were wary. The palace was silent in a way that demanded respect, every surface gleaming under the twin suns. Mason and Lyra walked through the grand halls, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Portraits of ancestors lined the walls, warriors and rulers who had shaped the empire. Lyra's eyes were drawn to each one, memories flickering but incomplete. Finally, they reached the throne room. The doors opened to reveal Queen Saraline. She was regal, her presence commanding, her white hair flowing like liquid light. Her eyes, violet like Lyra's, widened in disbelief. The court was silent, the tension nearly tangible. "Mother," Lyra whispered, tears forming in her eyes. The queen's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, her long robes rustling. "Lyra, is it truly you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Her eyes scanned the young woman in front of her, taking in every detail, the long hair, the delicate features, and the subtle strength in her posture. Then her gaze fell on Mason, standing quietly beside her daughter. "Who is this human?" the queen demanded, though her tone was mixed with curiosity, suspicion, and a hint of gratitude. Mason stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty, I am Mason. I found Princess Lyra drifting in a pod near Arkan 7. I took care of her and brought her home safely." "I mean no harm?" The queen studied him, her piercing gaze trying to read his intentions. There was a moment of stillness, as though the weight of the entire empire rested on her decision. Then she turned her eyes back to Lyra. "You have returned," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "All these years, Gone. And now you are here, alive. Lyra's lips quivered. She stepped forward and embraced her mother. The Queen's arms, once cold and commanding, softened. The court watched in stunned silence. It was a moment that no one had dared hope for. The lost princess was back, and the Queen's heart, long hardened, began to thaw. But peace did not last long. Rumors of betrayal and threats to the royal family had never disappeared. As Lyra and her mother reunited, a group of masked assassins attempted to enter the chamber, moving with silent precision. Mason noticed them instantly, his engineer's mind calculating trajectories and weaknesses. "Stay behind me," he shouted, stepping in front of Lyra and the Queen. He activated a small energy device he had brought, one that emitted a pulse to disable electronic and energy-based weapons. The assassins froze, momentarily caught off guard. Lyra's voice rose, commanding and melodic, and the remaining attackers hesitated as if compelled to obey. The Queen raised an eyebrow, astonished. "You have powers, Lyra," she whispered. Her daughter nodded, finally understanding the gifts she had carried all along. She had been more than a princess. She had been a protector, a force waiting to be awakened. The threat neutralized. The court fell silent again. Lyra turned to Mason, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You brought me home. You risked everything for me," she said softly. Mason shook his head. "I didn't do it for reward. I did it because it was right." The Queen studied him, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly warming. "You have done what no one else could," she said. "You have returned my daughter. For that you are in my debt, but also in my trust. You have proven humanity's worth to the Lysari Empire." Mason felt a mixture of relief and awe. He had come as a simple human from a distant planet, and now he stood in a throne room that had seemed unreachable for centuries, recognized by one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. Over the following days, Lyra reacquainted herself with her royal heritage. She learned about the political currents in the court, the factions that had schemed while she was gone, and the history that had shaped her empire. Mason stayed close, assisting her with translating technical reports, coordinating communications, and navigating the palace's intricate systems. Through it all, Lyra realized that Mason was more than an ally. He had given her courage, perspective, and a sense of belonging she had not felt in years. And Mason, in turn, saw in Lyra a leader who could shape the future of an empire, and a person whose bravery and compassion reminded him why humans had the potential to rise above their limits. One evening, as they walked along a balcony overlooking the glowing city, Lyra spoke. "Mason, do you realize what you've done? You didn't just bring me home. You've changed the future of this entire empire." Mason looked at her quietly. "I only did what anyone should do, but I guess sometimes even ordinary people can do extraordinary things." Lyra smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his. "You are not ordinary. You are the human who returned a princess to her mother. That is a story the stars will remember." The Queen, observing from her chambers, nodded to herself. She had underestimated humans, thought them weak and self-serving. Yet Mason had defied expectations, risked his life, and proven the courage of his species. Perhaps, she thought, humanity was not just worth tolerating. They could become allies, partners, even friends of the Lysari Empire. Days later, a ceremony was held to officially recognize Lyra's return. The entire court gathered, from generals to ministers, all witnessing the reunion of the Queen and her daughter. Mason was invited to stand beside them, honored as the human who had changed the course of Lysari history. Lyra stood proudly, her violet eyes shining, her voice carrying authority and warmth. "My mother, Queen Saraline, has ruled with wisdom and courage," she said to the assembly. "I have returned not just as her daughter, but as a witness to the bravery and loyalty of a human who risked everything for me. Let it be known that humanity will be welcomed as allies of the Lysari Empire." The court erupted in applause. Mason felt a surge of pride, but also humility. He had not acted for recognition, and yet here he was, standing in a palace beyond imagination, acknowledged as a hero. That night, Lyra and Mason sat on the balcony once more, overlooking the lights of Lysari Prime. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for bringing me home, but for reminding me that hope exists even after years of darkness." Mason placed his arm around her. "We're just getting started," he said softly. "The galaxy is full of challenges, but together, we can face them all." Above, the stars stretched infinitely, Silent witnesses to a human who had dared to care, a princess who had been returned to her mother, and an empire that had begun to see the potential of an unlikely ally. The next morning aboard the Aurora's Edge, Evan woke to a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. He had survived the incident with Lyra, perhaps even earned her respect. But the memory of his accidental words still made his stomach twist. The incident had spread quickly through whispers among both humans and Velrithians on the station. Some laughed quietly, others gawked, and a few simply observed, curious about how this young human had inadvertently altered social dynamics in the palace. Evan's breakfast tray sat untouched in front of him. He replayed the previous day's events in his head. The moment when Lyra had smiled, the strange admiration in her gaze, the quiet way she had studied him. He could not stop thinking about it. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. "Enter," he said, hoping he sounded calmer than he felt. The door slid open and a Velrithian guard stepped in. "Commander Lyra requests your presence in the High Council chamber." Evan froze. The High Council was reserved for significant discussions, often involving planetary alliances or military strategy. He had never been called there for any reason other than technical support. Panic gnawed at him. Had the incident escalated beyond control? He followed the guard in silence, each step echoing in the polished halls of the palace. When he entered the chamber, he found it filled with tall Velrithian elders, their expressions unreadable, their presence both imposing and serene. Lyra stood at the center, arms crossed, her silver eyes fixed on him with calm authority. "Human Evan Cole," one elder began, his voice resonant and formal, "you have made a statement about Commander Lyra that has drawn attention."
"Speak now."
"Explain your intent." Evan's throat went dry. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder, a gesture of support that was almost unheard of in their strict hierarchical society. "This human spoke his thoughts without intent," Lyra said, her voice steady and clear, "and yet his honesty reveals courage. He admired beauty without deception, which is something rare among our people. I vouch for him." The chamber fell silent. Murmurs spread among the elders. Humans did not usually appear in such high councils, and one vouching for another in such a situation was even rarer. The discussion turned to hushed debates about human nature, honesty, and how Velrithians might learn from it. Evan realized that the embarrassing incident had not destroyed him. It had opened a window into something far larger. He had shown them what human honesty could look like, and it intrigued them. After the council concluded, Lyra escorted him back through the palace corridors. "Your species has a unique way of handling mistakes," she said softly. "You turn embarrassment into learning. That is remarkable." Evan smiled awkwardly. "I never meant for this to happen. Honestly, I thought it would be the end of me." Lyra chuckled, a light sound that echoed in the corridor like music. "Sometimes the unexpected teaches us more than the deliberate. Today your mistake has reminded us of something valuable." They reached a quiet observation balcony overlooking the Velrithian city. The lights shimmered across crystalline towers, reflecting in the canals below like liquid stars. Lyra leaned on the railing, studying the city before turning back to Evan. "I have spent centuries learning protocol, rules, and careful thought," she said. "Humans, you see beyond all of that. You notice the unspoken, the overlooked. Your perspective is enlightening." Evan felt a surge of pride. Never had he imagined that his awkwardness could inspire admiration from someone as extraordinary as Lyra. Yet, more than pride, he felt a strange connection, as if their encounter had bridged two completely different worlds. As they spoke, Lyra reached into a small pocket in her uniform and produced a delicate metallic charm. It was shaped like a spiral of stars, small enough to fit in a human hand, yet intricate beyond imagination. She handed it to him silently. "This is a Velrithian token," she explained. "It represents unspoken connection. Consider it a reminder that honesty and perception are gifts even when they are clumsy." Evan held the charm carefully, awestruck. Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," Lyra replied with a faint smile. "Sometimes words are less important than understanding." Over the next few days, Evan continued his work on the communication array, but something had changed. Lyra and he had developed a subtle rhythm, an understanding that did not need words. She would offer suggestions without criticizing, observe without judging, and occasionally her gaze lingered just long enough to make him aware of her attention. The other Velrithians noticed as well. Some whispered about the human who dared speak his thoughts openly. Others speculated on Lyra's unusual patience and apparent fascination. Evan tried to ignore the attention, focusing on his tasks, but he could not deny the thrill of being recognized, appreciated, and, most importantly, understood by an alien who had spent centuries perfecting observation and control. One afternoon, the palace was thrown into mild chaos when a minor technical malfunction caused the communications array to flicker and hum uncontrollably. Sparks flew, alarms sounded, and several Velrithian technicians froze in confusion. Evan acted without hesitation, assessing the system and making split-second adjustments. Lyra observed closely, noting his precise and fearless handling of the crisis. "You remain composed," she remarked once the system stabilized. "Even in chaos you do not panic. This is human instinct, I assume." "Yes," Evan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "We adapt quickly. If we can't fix it, we improvise." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Your species' combination of honesty and ingenuity is fascinating. It may explain why humans survive against odds that would overwhelm others." As the days passed, Evan and Lyra's bond strengthened. They shared conversations about their respective cultures, philosophies, and personal experiences. Evan learned that Velrithians prized emotional control above all else, often suppressing natural responses to maintain societal harmony. Humans, by contrast, expressed thoughts impulsively, embracing vulnerability in ways Velrithians found alien and, increasingly, admirable. One evening, while adjusting the array near the observation balcony, Evan accidentally brushed against a control panel, sending a minor pulse of energy across the system. The lights flickered and the hum deepened. He cursed softly under his breath. Lyra approached, her long figure casting a shadow across the panels. "You are careful," she said, not accusing, simply observing. "Yet you allow yourself to make mistakes openly and you correct them. That is rare." Evan looked up at her, startled. "I guess I don't think about it too much. I just react." Her gaze softened. "Reaction without fear is a courage. Your species possesses something many others do not. Instinct paired with honesty. That is why I find your presence here intriguing." Evan's heart thumped in his chest. He tried to focus on the system, but the sincerity in her voice made it impossible. I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said quietly. "You did not," Lyra replied. "Instead, you reminded us of the value of perception. You have shown me and others that honesty can be more powerful than etiquette." In the following week, the station held a small ceremonial gathering, a formal event to honor collaboration between humans and Velrithians. Evan was initially anxious about attending, fearing whispers and judgment. Yet when he arrived, Lyra was already there, standing with calm confidence. She greeted him with a nod, a gesture that silently told him he belonged. During the ceremony, various speakers addressed the gathering, highlighting successful projects, shared discoveries, and cultural exchanges. When it came time for formal acknowledgments, the Velrithian Council surprised Evan by calling him forward. "You, Human Evan Cole," a senior elder announced, "have demonstrated qualities uncommon among visitors to Velrith: honesty, courage, and ingenuity. For this you are recognized by the Council, and we express our respect." Evan could hardly believe it. The same moment that could have ended in embarrassment now marked recognition and admiration. He stepped forward, feeling Lyra's steady presence beside him, grounding him. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Lyra placed her hand briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of respect and personal connection. "You have shown us that human perception can illuminate what centuries of training cannot," she said softly. Evan smiled, holding the metallic charm in his hand. "I never thought a mistake could do something like this." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment a genuine warmth crossed her face. Perhaps it was never a mistake. Perhaps it was simply truth spoken at the right moment. As the human ship prepared to return to orbit, Evan looked back at the palace. Lyra stood on the balcony watching him. He waved and she returned the gesture. Then, in a voice that only he could hear, she added, "Not once, human. You reminded us what it means to feel." Evan's heart raced. He did not know what the future held, but he understood one undeniable truth. Honesty, even when awkward or accidental, had the power to bridge worlds. And in the vast expanse of space, that truth could change everything.